Pun of the podcast, I apologize.
We do. Yes.
You said you didn't know much about the other markets, but you do have a relationship with SHRM. And what do you know about what's different in New England and Boston compared to what you're hearing from your SHRM counterparts in other markets?
Absolutely.
Do you get together with them?
We do. Yep, okay. Absolutely.
So there's a group of CEOs or executive directors, whatever they call them, in each market, and you gather.
Yep, absolutely. So SHRM is sort of the governing parent, if you will, out of Washington, D.C., and meaning SHRM. So there's over 500 chapters, SHRM chapters across the country. And, but 500.
Oh, so there's, okay, yeah.
So the chapters are, as small as 35 people and as large as 3,000 or 4,000 people. And
what's your membership right now? What we're talking about?
We're a little over 2,100. So we're what they consider super mega. So there's about 5 of us that are around this size. And then there's another dozen that are sort of fit the super mega fold. And so in that, there's maybe 20 of us that get together on an annual basis, face to face. Sometimes
the large chapters.
We're all large chapters. We're not all exactly structured the same way. Some of them are still more volunteer based, but those of us that are have the larger membership and are structured, we have we each have 5 or 6, 7 staff. We don't run a big conference. We have enough similarity from a business standpoint that it makes sense for us to get together. We also have monthly meetings, just conference calls to share ideas and things like that. So I think just like anything, different markets need different things, right? When I used to, hire salespeople for Boston Beer, the type of person or the type of sales that you would do in this market are very different than Texas or very different than the Pacific Northwest or Southern California. So, they're just different needs based on what industry is there. So, because that feeds into what kind of role that HR might play and how many corporate headquarters are there. So, you might be in Atlanta where there are a lot of big corporations, you have a lot of big companies, so that, you may have a variety of HR professionals. And Silicon Valley, completely different, set of needs. They even have their own certification. So it depends on, the different markets. I think in general, we're on the same page in terms of most of our programming around what the needs are. But again, it depends on, and we're on the same page in terms of what the other competition is. So everybody sort of has the same, social media competition, the same market, brokers or people offering programming in the market that provides, some competition. But generally, the type of programming that might be done is mostly based on kind of what is needed. And here in Boston, I think there are a couple of things. One is we're a heavy academic environment. So even when we talk about certification, New England was one of the last ones to sort of jump on the certification.
Isn't that ironic?
It is, but we're also what people like to call overeducated. So we would go back and get an MBA versus become certified. So there's SHRM certification and there's HRCI certification. And in either case, they've been slower. Now, in the last couple of years, and I think that it's both because of the evolution of the profession and also because of the impact of the economy, we started to see certification a plus, certification required. So now I think we've probably caught up to most other markets. But in general, people would go back and get a master's degree or some other advanced degree, whether it was in business or not. In
for
lieu
HR,
of, in lieu of certification. So that, I think that makes us a little different in terms of how we might approach some of our programming.
Who's the greatest leader you've ever worked for?
I think a couple come to mind. One, I would say Jim Cook, who's the founder of Boston Beer. There was just, ironically, an article this morning on him from the Business Insider, and they were talking about, he's a billionaire, right? And yet he's just Jim. He's in his flannel, even in the interviews, flannel Sam Adams shirt and his khaki pants. And he said, I'm the Willy Wonka of beer. I mean, he just hasn't, they're like, this guy has the best job in the world. He's like, I'm drinking by 8 o'clock in the morning, but I'm a trained professional. Like, I think I admire that. He hasn't really changed. I mean, he definitely went through this period, and I was at the tail end of this when I came on board, of being the CEO and president. And the man's got 3 degrees from Harvard. He's absolutely capable of being CEO and president. But he handed that off to someone and became the brewer. And that's where I feel like this with Nara, like when you find your spot, like, and clearly that had been his spot, but for whatever reason he'd gone into the CEO role for a while because, you know, he owned the company. When they went public, then he started to do this other stuff. And I just admired that he hasn't really changed that much. And I think he's been true to himself.
Consistent.
And consistent, and the brand's done really well, and it's had its ebbs and flows, but he's stayed true to himself and to the brand, which I think, you know, is admirable 30-some years later.
Right. Really led the craft brew revolution.
Yeah, absolutely. Even with the pressure of, you know, all the things that have been thrown their way in terms of, you don't brew everything in Massachusetts, or you
I'm glad you brought that up. I was going to bring that up. I remember watching a Gotcha investigative reporting piece. I think it was on 2020.
Yeah. And
they were interviewing him. And they asked him that question like they caught him. You don't even brew this in Boston. And he had the answer ready.
Yeah.
If Julia Child came to your kitchen and made you dinner, would you say that you cooked dinner or Julia Child? And all the time during the interview, he was sipping as Sam Adams. And I like that guy right off the bat. So,
yeah.
But that's a great experience you had to get up and close with him.
Yeah. Yeah, really, you know, someone who I just think has just been true to who he is and not tried to be someone else. You know, which is admirable.
Protecting the innocent or the guilty. Can you share a bad leader story?
Sure. I think that you know, having worked in HR, you see all kinds of things, right? And so maybe not necessarily someone I work directly for, but I think that in environments that are, well, when the business is set up to incentivize people for things that are not always perfectly aligned with a people strategy. So if your primary job is sales, I don't even care what you're selling, that's going to be front and center. And that's great. But when you move into a role where you have responsibility for people in general, I think that's where I've seen the rub, because it's this is what I do, and this is how the organization makes money, and so why would I want to do anything else? Why would I want to develop people? Why would I care about my behavior? If I'm the top salesperson, I'm probably going to, be able to I can schmooze my way out of having to do these things. And so there's this incongruency with, and it doesn't just happen in sales. I think people being moved from technical roles into leadership, sometimes the behavior comes out of just not knowing what to do, and sometimes it comes out of ego, right? And so in every organization I've been in, I've probably dealt with, my fair share of people who I either had to sell on why we're trying to, develop someone, or why we should fire someone even though you'd really like to just bad behavior, kicking a garbage can, stomping their feet.
But they get away with it sometimes because of those reasons you described.
Absolutely.
But I wonder the next generation, I don't know if the millennials are going to put up with that.
I absolutely agree with you. I think sometimes I feel like I put, because all these things that the millennials are doing, I love, like the flexible work and, just the fluidity with how they think and, the lack of hierarchy, all of these things. And I absolutely agree with you. I think they won't put up with a non-diverse, non-inclusive organization. And I don't think they'll put up with bad behavior, partly because they don't have to, right? And partly because they know it's not right. And it's not that you and I didn't, feel like we had to put up with it, or we didn't think it was right, or we weren't purpose driven. It's just this generation has a bigger voice than I think that Gen X did, probably because of their size.
Well, we were raised by people that worked for the same company for their whole life.
Exactly.
Right.
40 years. Right. Yeah. And you just sort of put up with it. Yeah. You don't rock the boat.
You mentioned diversity and inclusion, and my view is that NERA has done some great things. I've been to many events that you've put on since you've been the CEO of NERA that have had great speakers, and maybe just a little bit about your thinking on diversity and inclusion, and then some of the people that you look to the thought leadership in that area. I know you've had some of them speak, but just maybe a little bit more about what NERA or your view is.
Absolutely.
With regard to that, where you think things should go.
Absolutely. So, I will say that NERA has had a footprint in D&I for quite a long time, which I'm very proud of. When I came on board, they already had the D&I Community Forum, and that had been running for years and years of the gala, obviously, that had been running for